So today we are going to look at how we can refresh our data flows so that the updated data will be made available in our Power Apps to be used. So from the last video, we learned how to create data flows. So I'll put the link below so that if you haven't looked at it, you can go ahead and look at it. The name of the data flow we gave was account data flow. Now, inside the data flow itself, in Dataverse, there are two ways of refreshing the data flow. So when you go to the data flow settings, we have manual and then automatic refreshing of the data flows. We have originally picked manual refresh. The manual refresh means that you have to go in, right click, and then refresh, or you have to put in the mechanism of refreshing. The automatic, as the name implies, the data flow itself will refresh based on the parameters that you give. So for instance, when you click on the refresh automatically, it gives you some parameters. For example, we have if you say every 5 minutes, and then when we type the 5 minutes, we have it gives you an information. The refresh frequency exceeds the limit of 48 refreshes per day. So what it means is that we are limited on the number of how many times we can refresh in a day. So we are limited to 48 times a day in terms of using this automatic refreshing. So you have to do your calculation very well, such that the frequency that you put here in terms of the automatic settings of refreshing meet the 48 times per day. I hope that is clear. So you have to manage this one very well. So this is automatic refreshing. Now there is also what we call the full refreshing or the incremental refresh. So when we go to edit incremental refresh, right click and open. Our tables are linked or set to full refresh. In other words, whenever the data flow refreshes to update the existing and what have been added to the data source, all the data will be pulled back from the data source into the data flow. So looking at the example that we originally used in building the data flow, we had about 10 rows. So assuming there have been more entries and we now have say 20 rows, when you do the full refresh, the data flow is going to call from the first row to the new or additional row. So we are going to call 20 rows, and that is going to take a lot of time and resources. Then that is the full refresh. When we talk about the incremental refresh, the incremental refresh is going to only look for the new data. So in our case, if 5 rows have been added, it's not going to refresh or pull back the existing data. It's going to look at what has changed. So if nothing has changed here, it will ignore here and then go to the new rows that have been added, and then it will going to refresh that. So that is more efficient. That is the incremental refreshing. But the incremental refreshing also has its own limitations. First of all, there has to be a date column, because the settings that you are supposed to choose the number of days, quarters, months, years, supposed to pick one of this. You pick a month, then you type in say 2 months, you refresh every 1 month. Then it means that there should be a date that the data flow is going to compare and see whether the time is up for it to refresh or not. So that is why this place is grayed out, so I don't have any date column. When we look at the data that I'm having, there is no date column here, there's no date column. So when we look at the rules that is published in I think September 2022, one of the limitations as is listed here is that in Power BI or Power Apps, using incremental refresh requires that data ingested into the data flow have a date field. So there should be a date field. Probably that is the reason why this one is not highlighted. So it means that since we don't have a date field, we can't use the incremental, so we can only go for the full refresh, which is also quite resource consuming. But for now, there is also another way of refreshing, which is what we are going to go for, and that is even more efficient because it gives you a lot of opportunity to even use it in your Power Apps. So we are going to use a flow. So we are going to build a flow to refresh the data source. I have already built one, so the existing one, so let me build a new one so that we all get accustomed to how to go about it. I'm going to choose let's say a cloud. I'm going to choose Power Apps because we are going to place a button in Power Apps, and whenever we click on the Power Apps, it goes back to data flow, refresh it, and then the data becomes available inside Power Apps for us to analyze or look at the data. So I'll pick Power Apps. So I'll pick a Power Apps and then go ahead and search for the Power Query data flow refresh. The next step is to go for data refresh, data flow. So one of the actions under data flow Power Query is to refresh Power Queries or Power Data Flows. So here, to refresh the data flow, we need a group type, and the group type is only asking us, we have two ways in the Power Platform to keep data flows. One of them in Power BI, another one in Dataverse, which is being used for Power Apps. So is the data flow associated with Power BI, which normally have the workspaces, or Power Apps and the environment? In our case, because we are building it inside Dataverse, we will go for the environment. Now when you pick the environment, it's going to ask you which of the environment. I have two environments, the default and then NTS environment. Which of them am I going to use? Now the data flow is saved on the default environment, so I'll pick the default environment. Then it's going to ask you the name of the data flow. Now I have three data flows. What we are talking about is the account data flow. So that is it. So with this, we are ready to refresh the data flow inside Power Apps. Now let's rename the data flow. Let's say account refresh data flow. Account refresh data flow. Okay, so then let's save it. Okay, so once it is saved, we head back straight to Power Apps. We insert a button there, then we call the flow inside the Power Apps to refresh the data source, or to refresh the data flow that we have created, such that when there are new items added or new entries, the new entries could be retrieved inside Power. So when I come to my Power Apps, I'm going to insert a button. Then let me check whether the saving is okay. It's already saved. I will insert a button and then go for the flow. On your right hand side, we have the so either you are creating a new flow or you are looking for an existing flow. In our case, it's an existing flow, so we name it account. Okay, it's as if there is not reflected now. So let me see. It's saved also. It's also saved. So add, search for account data flow. I thought account. Oh, it's not available now. So okay, so let me pause it and refresh the app itself in order not to waste time. You want to know that it's reflected. Okay, so now I have refreshed the app, and in fact the easiest way to make sure you create the flow and it's quickly reflects in the app is to use this one, but we went in directly to the Power Automate before creating the flow. So let's go back and search for, you go to Power Automate, you check for the flows, you check for the name that we use, which is the account. So this is what we created in the Power Automate. We click on it and then we add it to the app. So as it asks, let's add a button, and it is this button that we are going to click for it to refresh. I think my network is quite slow today. I hope you bear with me. Let's rename the button. Refresh. Refresh. Flow. Okay, so refresh flow. So on select of this button, you go for the refresh account flow. Then we just close it because there are no parameters. So from here, when we click on this button, we expect the data to refresh and to be made available inside Power Apps. So to ensure that we are in the right process, I want to count the number of items in this gallery. When we look at this gallery, the name is gallery 1.1. So 1. So we have 10 items in this gallery as it reflects here. So we also have 10. Okay, so let's assume we have downloaded additional 5 from our data source and we added it. Let's try and change the amount. 700, 800, 100, 60,000. Just to ensure. Okay, so this is added to the data source. We have saved. We go back to the flow. Let's just to check the number of items we have there. Just to prove that whether the refresh is working or not. Okay, so here the number of items are also listed here. There are 10. Then let's go back to Power Apps. Let's create the app. Then click on this refresh button and see what happens. So now we are refreshing the app. Okay, so now the app is refreshed. Okay, so we see that we have clicked this and then it's refreshed, but it's not reflected in the app. Let's go back to the data flow. Okay, so the data flow, we see that the next refresh in progress. So the button that we click here is actually working. Okay, for now it's finished refreshing. So we can go back and we check the flow. The flow run history also say that it succeeded in running. Let's go to the app. The app is not refreshed yet, so let's assume deleting the data and then bringing in the new. Okay, so we see that straight away the number of items have increased to 26. So what it means is that the new items that we added has automatically been also added to the Power App. So what it means is that instead of wasting time to go through the process of managing, cleaning this data or analyzing this data, just copy it and paste from the data source or original data source, because we have already gone through the painful process of using Power Query to do this. You don't need to go through another process in reviving or revising or cleaning the data. You only do it once, you refresh, and then it's reflected in your data source. Thank you. I hope this was very useful. Thank you.